Carmen sitting in Mount Isa is waiting for us. So thanks, Di. And Carmen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. And thanks really for the invitation to Carmen and I to present today. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Julie for the heroic efforts at organising this conference behind the scene, which involved many recalcitrant university procedures, arcane university procedures. So she survived, the university may not. And so Carmen's up in Mount Isa and I'm here, and so we're kind of trying to not only bridge knowledges but bridge technology. So we're going to be tag teaming, team tagging. And so we'll flip back and forwards and hopefully get through what we're trying to convey today, starting off with Carmen, if you want to take over.
Thanks, Di. Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen Cooms Delaney, a Kondamuka woman from Minjerribah on North Stradbroke Island. I am a development facilitator at QSNTS and I'm located up in the Mount Isa office. Couldn't make it down today, so that's why I'm on Zoom. But I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners whose land in which we're gathered today. I want to acknowledge the Kalkadoon people, their elders past, present and emerging, and then we're Yumaba, the Yagara and Turrbal people. Just a bit of a background with myself and Di Smith, what the presentation is about today. We're going to explore the governance challenges that PBCs face within their native title journey and how the People, Place and Partnership program developed at QSNTS supports them in overcoming these challenges. So we're going to highlight the practical implementation of what we're going to refer to as the PPP program throughout the rest of the presentation. Which is being delivered in collaboration with our groups, anthropologists and our facilitators. QSNTS, we take a long-term adaptive approach, tailoring the program to the unique needs of each PBC, and it really requires innovative ways of working, flexible facilitation methods, and adaptable workshop tools. So to ensure that the program aligns with its developmental capacity and building goals, we have commissioned a 2-year independent evaluation currently in progress. And anthropologist Dr. Diane Smith from ANU is conducting this applied evaluation alongside the program delivery. So today we're going to share with you how our collaborative approach by bringing different professional perspectives really helps integrate that real-time evaluation findings to enhance the program in partnership with our PBCs.
Thanks, Carm. And just before kind of going into a bit of the background context, and again, the Lee Sackett's word of transition, which we're all trending to buzz now with that word, I just wanted to say a bit about, and we'll talk about it more in the second half of the paper. So as Carmen said, I've been employed for a 2-year period to do, and I'm unashamedly declaring that that's applied, engaged, and operating in real time. So I spend a day a week over the 2 years going to every PBC workshop under the PPP program that QSNTS is delivering. My job is to evaluate the design, the delivery, implementation, the resources and the tools that are being used, and to talk with PBCs about the outcomes in each of those workshops, and look then generally at, so is that program delivering what it is aiming to deliver, and how might it be improved? So I say real time because Carmen and I sit down together at lunches in those workshops and I give feedback on the facilitation, on the engagement from the PBC board who's at that workshop, and she then, we'll go into that later on. So it's it very much is engaged, embedded, but I regard myself as being a critical friend. In other words, maintaining independence in terms of my advice, my analysis, my research over this period of time. Transitions. So I think a lot of people have mentioned this. For me, the emergence of native title claimants into the post-determination phase, where they hold native title, we all think about it as being a rights recognition and a legal recognition framework. But first and foremost, it's a self-governance transition above everything. And I give a shout out here to Ivan Ingram, who's written, I think, a really excellent paper about the changes in the mandatory statutory framework that claimants have to govern a claim under, and then the abrupt change that happens when they're then required to govern via an incorporated organisation. Different people sometimes involved in that. Totally different statutory requirements, oversight by ORIC, and 2 new wonderful classes of people, native title holders and native title members. And in that transition, there are also a whole series of path dependencies that have been set up in the claim process. If left unresolved, as you're all aware, just percolate over into the post-determination phase. So for the groups involved, it's really a tumultuous transition. Because it involves Western legal structures, the native title group is really left to try and figure out, ironically, a determination recognises they have continuing connection to laws and traditions and maintaining those, but then they're not enabled to actually govern according to those. They're immediately locked into a corporate structure, and they have to actually try and figure out how to govern, not just the corporate structure, but that intercultural field where they have native title holders, they have new members who've got to be registered. And what's the place of culture? What's the place of laws and relationships and values in a rule book and in the processes of the board? So the governance challenge is confronting, and it's one that is associated with, I can do the swipe to the left. It's not only an issue of is the governance fit for purpose that groups have when they go into that post-determination phase. Mobs have spent a long time in the native title claim process. So quite reasonably, they come out the other side and said, well, okay, what did all that mean? We want to get something happening now. We've been waiting a long time, right? How do we get something happening? And if we follow up the stark picture that Michael presented to us, it's not a matter of just being able to jump into development opportunities, making decisions, establishing policies. Those are all practice issues that require staff. So I'll pass over to Carmen, who's going to now tell us a bit about the nature of some of those challenges that then intersect with this issue about, so how do you govern when you get to this stage?
Thanks, Di. So each PVC has their unique assets and strengths, such as natural resources, cultural knowledge, and intellectual property to support governance and development. However, they also face systemic constraints or disability factors, which really hinder their governance and service delivery. And unlike deficits, disability factors are structural limitations, so similar to those identified by the Commonwealth Grants Commission in assessing service delivery costs for governments. And when applied to PVCs, this concept highlights the financial inequalities that they face due to persistent underfunding. So current funding only covers compliance needs, leaving real little room for governance for development. As a result, directors often work unpaid, balancing their PVC duties with their daily lives. And that leads to immense workload pressures. And with limited staff and expertise, many PVCs rely on a single individual for governance, which really increases that risk of burnout. Next slide, Di. So beyond external challenges, the internal conflicts linked to native title experience also impacts PVC. So to implement the PPP program, we began developing its own developmental capacity in around 2021. So adopting a new approach to working with PBCs and native title groups. And this has been a real learning process for us, which is, requires adaptation and experimentation. A developmental approach really focuses on bringing people together to achieve self-determined goals that enhance their quality of life and collective capabilities. And key characteristics include ongoing negotiation of power dynamics, community-led problem identification, active participation, long-term progress, and capacity building at both the individual and collective levels. And QSNTS really works to refine this process and approach to effectively implement the PPP program best for our clients. Next slide. So PBCs operate indefinitely, placing ongoing pressure on their developmental role. So rebuilding self-governance should begin early and be really well supported. And the program takes a rights-based approach, so recognising that native title rights is a foundation for Indigenous self-determination and development. And it's guided by 4 key principles, being self-determination, where PBCs have the right to make their own decisions; empowerment, where PBCs should control and utilise these assets, their knowledge and their heritage; and collective action, so strengthening voices and solidarity really enhances that governance. And then working and learning together, like collaboration and shared knowledge, really drive effective governance and development. So at QSNTS, we support that intercultural governance by uniting the groups around their strengths, around their native title rights, and around their partnerships. And the program framework is grounded in that cultural values, their identity and historical governance, fostering gradual empowerment and self-determined alliances on country. Next slide, please. The program follows 4 interconnected phases, being foundation, planning, operational, and partnerships, which is potentially leading to a 5th phase, which we are calling nation rebuilding. And so we deliver it through what we call a yarning and doing framework. So it consists of client-led workshops on key topics tailored to each PBC's governance journey. And the approach gradually builds their skills, collective understanding, and confidence by actively involving the community members. And the workshop uses a developmental framework with reflective exercises, including a visual planning tool, as you can see up here. The one that we've got showing as an example is one we use for the Wonkamada mob. We used their sandhills of dooms, success, obstruction, and doing. So we use landmarks that are, I guess, relevant to their country. So if they're island people, we'd call it islands of doom, rivers of doom, things like that. So the tool helps participants identify strengths, address their obstacles, and create actionable strategies using their cultural values as a guide. And it fosters problem solving, ownership, and motivation, reinforcing that success is achieved by leveraging the strengths of their people. Next slide, Di. Thank you. So at QSNTS, we follow what we call a co-preparation model, where the facilitators will collaborate with our directors to shape the workshop content, location, and the delivery. So this partnership-driven approach really empowers these groups and the directors to lead and take ownership of the workshops. And the developmental model follows a continuous cycle. So we're presenting ideas, reflecting, practicing, and improving based on past experiences. And we're at the workshop when we use a relaxed yarning and doing style, fostering open discussion, storytelling, and collaborative decision-making in a real culturally safe environment. So the strategies we include are having First Nations facilitators, upholding cultural protocols, and creating safe spaces to enhance comfort and engagement. In the facilitation, we emphasize deep listening, patience, and respecting silence as part of the natural workshop flow, which allows our mob to reconnect and heal while ensuring that the facilitator captures that real authentic feedback without assumptions. And the goal is to balance that traditional cultural practice with modern expectations, and we navigate both respectfully.
Thanks.
You're up, Di.
Yeah, thanks. So what Carmen's describing is a process of a program that can take anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 years with a single PBC, and there are around 14 currently going through it. So she's actually talking about a series of workshops being run on similar topics with 14 different workshops and customising to suit the circumstances that each PBC is in, but actually tackling some of the really big issues that they've got to address in respect to those challenges. And one of the ones that I'm particularly interested in is this governance and governance rebuilding. And by governance, there are lots of buzzwords surrounding this and whether it's appropriate and applicable. But governance is really just group work, a group's work. And so if we're a group and we want to get something done together that's important to us, then we've got to be able to come together and talk about it, make decisions, plan and implement how to do it, see if we're actually implementing it in a way that's leading to what we wanted to achieve, governance. That's the same kind of capability that we're talking about in terms of PBCs when they emerge out of into the post-determination phase. And if we look at, and capacity building is another one of these buzzwords. The big thing for me is always like how. It's an easy thing to talk about, building governance capacity in a PBC that's linked to a native title group across all those domains that Kevin was referring to. It's intercultural. One of the things that's coming out with the evaluation that I think is interesting is in terms of a developmental facilitation for building capacity is that you only get capacity if you can combine learning and practice. Right? I've just said that to you. Tomorrow, probably 3 or 4 people might remember that fact. Within 24 hours when we learn something, we forget 50% of it. So how do you embed new knowledge that might be really important? You do it through practice, and often with PBCs, any organisation. It's on the job, experiential, taking that bit of knowledge, seeing if it works, seeing if you can put it into practice, tinkering around with it, experimenting with it. There are no fast solutions to these issues that PBCs are facing. They need time to experiment. So one of the interesting things that's coming out from international research is spaced learning that's done in parallel with distributed applied practice. That's a good model. In other words, the one-off ORIC workshop or one-off training by anyone really doesn't help all that much, right? Which is one of, I think, the potential really valuable benefits of the PPP program. And what PBCs are doing themselves is actually then taking those workshops and creating a very specific kind of pathway through it. So they're customised, they sequence through topics and take a solution away and test it in terms of, say, cultural values code, a governance charter. Then they're on to the 4th workshop, which is about strategic planning. And someone will say in the lead up to that, hang on, can we just go back and go over that stuff that you talked to us about in the first workshop? So there's no nice, neat, sequential building. People do a loop back learning when they apply and practice things. They've got a new context, a development comes up, and people will say, oh, actually, I remember back then, they said something about the way the board might be able to start working with other organisations in our area. Can we actually have a workshop on that? So a totally new workshop. So this loop-backed pedagogy, a way of learning and putting it into practice, I think is a good learning for us in terms of how we might think about supporting PBCs to rebuild governance a bit so that it actually has traction, it gets embedded over time. And so this is a kind of time when Carmen and I just wanted to talk about, so, like, how do we work together? 5 minutes. Okay, Carmen, we've got 5 minutes to cover the world.
Mm-hmm. All right. So when we go in to facilitate these workshops, the main things we want to cover is we know who the client is. We do that at QSNTS. It's always know your client, know their governance journey, know their dynamics, coming in humble and not acting like we're coming in to fix all their problems and we know better than them. So you come in and listen and yarn and ask good questions and give supportive feedback. Also being aware of body language, reading the room, reading people's faces, reading how they're kind of engaging with the program and the facilitation, and then having plans in your head about what the program actually, what we want to achieve by this workshop. So if things go stray, something happens, arguments break down, you'll have backup plans. So that all that goes on in your brain while you're trying to facilitate and act like you know what you're talking about.
How do you reckon it works between you and I? You know, like I'm sitting there as a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Workshops happening, and I'm not a facilitator. I'm just this kind of, hanging around weird person that everyone says, "What's she doing?" How do you reckon it works between you and I as you're facilitating, and I'm supposed to be there, kind of being this little evaluation brains trust, giving you these kind of insights, and are they of any use?
Yes. Well, usually we will have a plan and we'll go into a workshop, and then something will happen. Someone will have an agenda that they want to bring up, and so you can see it's kind of starting to go a bit hairy. So what we'll do is we'll have a break, and then I'll go to Di and yarn with her in the break and say, look, it looks like I'm losing them, or they're getting a bit cranky about certain things. Let's come up with an idea on how we're going to flip the workshop on its head and change it and come up with another kind of pathway on how we're going to kind of work through the rest of the day. And so I, bounce a lot of ideas off you. You'll give me your feedback back, and then we'll kind of come up with like a middle approach on what my idea will be and what yours is, and how we can kind of roll it out.
And I think it's a nice description, that word flipping, of the interactions. Something's not working in a workshop, for all kinds of reasons you'll have experienced. And the facilitators, when I say they've got a developmental approach to facilitation, it means the skills include having to be really fast on your feet, having to read the room, having to look at the tool that might be triggering people. There's a governance journey map. What's the way people might actually prefer to use that? How could it be used? I'm sitting there kind of trying to condense my, kind of obtuse anthropological insights into, so what might actually assist in the facilitation and also in the engagement. And the nice thing I reckon that works, like with Carmen, is Carmen will just say, no, I don't think that'll work. For this and this reason, can we do something in a different way? And so we're experimenting in real time with the content and the facilitation. So I just think it's an interesting kind of potential role for anthropologists in your practice who do work developmentally. And this is kind of really the end of the slide, is to say that both at QSNTS, a whole host of anthros who have been encouraged to work in a whole of organisation, whole of client approach, multidisciplinary teams. QSNTS, I think, is trying something really radical, which is to break down in the land council's rep bodies these professional silos. Oh, the lawyers are over there in the very well kitted out rooms. The anthros are over here in the back rooms. Then there's the field, the engagement, and the field officers who are kind of wandering around, often hot desking, and don't have any place at all. Breaking down those silos, professional silos, and bringing teams together. That in itself is hard enough to do in a rep body. Then applying it. And I think anthros in these various areas have a really important role to play potentially across a host of post-determinate, we're calling it post-determination, but it's really just getting on with life. How do you exercise the rights that you've got? If you can't govern them, it's really of no use having those rights. So Carmen, did you want to say quickly, because we've got to end? Okay. From your perspective, in terms of the work of anthros, the sort of value that you think anthros can contribute in this sort of new kind of program approach?
Yeah, we rely heavily on each cohort to deliver a really well tailored package for all of our clients. But especially with the anthropologists, because with PPP, it's really interweaving traditional cultural practices into modern day I guess, governance kind of practices. So we rely on their knowledge of how the groups used to govern themselves and how we can kind of modernize that to today and how we can kind of interweave that into making sure that it's a really well managed PBC, but staying true to that really focus of culture, traditional laws and customs.
Thanks very much. I think that's us.
Yeah.
And then feel free to publish Diane in the running break.
Hey, thanks for that. That was fantastic. One of the issues we faced in our region is we try to build capacity on governance capacity, but then we have rotation of board members. So what's one of the ways you find dealing with these long-term projects and obviously internal politics sometimes that affect changing the board members and having to start from scratch again every couple of years?
Yeah, really, really, really big issue, and one which the program immediately has had to face. So I'll just throw over to Carmen, who's actually currently dealing with precisely that issue with AGMs.
Yep. So that is a significant factor that impacts that capacity building. So that's why we had that slide, that loop back learning. So we will have a journey set out for a group, and then all of a sudden an AGM comes up and we've got all new board members. So we will have to go back to Foundation 1, that first workshop, and start from scratch. And we give a bit of an overview of where you've come from so far, what your past directors have done, and what the concept of PPP is, and how we kind of want to continue on. So we give them a bit of a snapshot, like that corporate knowledge of where they've come, how far they've come so far, and the work that they're doing, and how they want to continue on. So that happens a lot, where we'll have to go back to square one and start again and kind of get them on as like an induction process for them. Yeah.
And that kind of, the implication of that is you've got to be, the organisation like QSNTS has got to be committed to the long run. Yeah.
Hi, it was very interesting. Thank you both very much. Really fascinating work. It seems to be, this is not a critique at all, but it seems to be directed very much to the governance of the corporation, its internal governance and the governance of its work, let's call it. What steps do you also taken to interact with and develop the involvement of the native title holders themselves, not simply the members, but the native title holders?
Yeah. Again, really important question. From my perspective as, doing the evaluation, that's a really important kind of disconnect and connect that still needs to be worked out within the project, because to do that, you need a lot more people within QSNTS who are devoted to that program, but you also need people out in communities to be able to then start working with them in this long-term way. So finding those people. So I think your question is really important. One of the ways that it's done in a very kind of beginning step is that the program builds into it not just a workshop with, say, the board, but a strategic planning starting off workshop. But before that, there'll have been a previous workshop that will be with any invited native title holders and members to talk about, so what are your aspirations? You've got native title. What do you want to have happen? And that's a very wide discussion. But then at a subsequent workshop, the board takes that information on and then says, so what is the reality checking on what we can do? Then a next workshop brings back native title holders and members to say, look, this is a draft that we've developed up as a strategic plan from that earlier aspirations one that you were at. So that's a matter of who's interested coming along to those holders and members. But there's no anthropological or QSNTS staff at the moment able to do, with respect to the program, that wider, how does that PBC governance align or not align and fit in with the building which is a lot about unity, rebuilding unity and solidarity. So, Carmen, did you want to say something on that issue?
Yeah, I think that's a point that's been brought up by our directors a lot, wanting to do like road shows to make sure they involve all of their native title holders, because a lot of them are dispersed far and wide, but we're very limited to the funding and the logistical side of it, of planning and getting out to everyone. So a lot of their long-term plans is to kind of build their capability within the PBC, and then them to try and transfer that knowledge through to their native title holders, through their families themselves. And then maybe looking for funding applications later on for nation building workshops within their own mobs as well. So it's definitely on their list of things that they'd like to start getting out and doing.